Well, and that kind of coincides with the fact that they still have this bad playoff record going on now for a long time, and eventually you would hope that it's going to come to an end. Do they have the right guy? Did the fan base feel that Mike McCarthy is the right guy?
A year ago, I'm very fortunate to have people like you ask me to kind of preview the Cowboys season. And the question I got a lot was, and I still get, is does Mike McCarthy have to reach the NFC Championship game to keep his job? And the answer I gave a lot last year that I won't give this year is, well, how does he miss it? Right? Like, is it a game-winning field goal that like clangs off the upright? Do they get blown out? Like, like the context of what happened, or if they get there, do they get there because of a weird penalty or something like that? Like, because then we would call it hollow. So the context really mattered. And all as the season went on, I really just kind of became, I would offer maybe Mike's biggest defender. In case anyone isn't aware, the Cowboys have won double-digit games 3 years in a row. That hasn't happened since the heyday of the 90s. They've been a playoff team 3 years in a row. That hasn't happened since the heyday of the 90s. Those aren't things that you hang banners for, and those are things that if they happen to other franchises, I think they would be regarded as, being among the better teams in the NFL if that were the case. But this team lives in an extraordinarily large shadow and is fighting the past, and obviously nobody will let them forget that. That being said, the way they lost, I always said, as we kind of went down the stretch, that McCarthy had to return unless things went truly, off script in the playoffs. And they did. And so my position after they lost was, you got to move on at this point in time. Now they didn't, and that is what it is. He's also entering a contract year. So you've got this added level of drama. I mean, this added level of unnecessary drama. His whole staff is in a contract year, including Mike Zimmer, who's a brand new addition to it. But that being said, there's only a single team in the NFL that has won more regular season games than them over the last 3 years. And that isn't meant to be like, cherry picking. He's been the coach for 4 years, and that first year Dak Prescott broke his ankle. So I think sure, if we're willing to kind of understand that's a bit of a mulligan. So in terms of time he's had Dak for the majority of the time, he is one of the best coaches in the NFL in the regular season. And I know that the jokes write themselves in that sense. And you're trailing only Kansas City. They're better than Buffalo. They're better than Philadelphia. They're better than Baltimore, than Cincinnati, than the Rams, and all these teams, and they can't get it done in the playoffs. And it's amazing. I mean, it truly is confounding. And even within that, they've lost to two teams in the playoffs. One of them is quarterbacked by the dude who we all think is now like the future truth in Jordan Love, but we're not willing to give them any leniency for losing to this guy that we're anointing to be incredibly good for the foreseeable future. And the other is this would-be dynasty, if not for the Kansas City Chiefs, but we act like, well, they're these losers because they lost to the mighty San Francisco 49ers, which is kind of amazing, when you break it down that way. I do think that there's, people look at like the Bills and they give them this pass of like, well, they just keep running into the Chiefs and like, that's okay. Well, these are their Chiefs, they're just not winning the Super Bowl. And so, I mean, I say all that to say, I trust Mike McCarthy. And my last part of this diatribe is, and I would ask you if you agree, if Nick Sirianni said, I'm going to take over play calling, and the Eagles offense soared, the exposés that would be written in the offseason would be insane. It'd be Nick Sirianni identified a problem. He, attacked it and he was correct. Mike McCarthy said, you know what? This offense that was very, very, very good. I mean, in fact, it was the best in the NFL in many metrics under Kellen Moore's supervision. He said, I think this can be better. And he dismissed Kellen Moore. And everybody said, well, you know what, Kellen, he's going to light the world on fire with the Chargers. And I know that they had injuries and things like that, sure, but that did not happen. No. And beyond that, what happened was Mike was right. CD had the best individual season of his career. Dak had the best individual season of his career. They were on fire on offense. And have you seen anyone give him any semblance of credit for that? I understand he's an easy target because he lost a PR battle to Aaron Rodgers many moons ago, but he deserves an enormous amount of credit for that in my mind. We magnify his mistakes. Does anybody talk about the fact that Dan Campbell blew a 17-point lead in the NFC Championship game? No. Does anybody talk about that Kyle Shanahan quite literally did not know the way that overtime rules worked in the Super Bowl? No. But people talk about the fact that Mike McCarthy lost at home as a 2 seed to the Green Bay Packers in the wild card round. Like, that's the most criminal offense that anybody can ever have. So I think it's such a weird juxtaposition. And if it's not obvious, these things have gotten, really contested over the offseason because of how volatile things have been. I would offer that I think Mike's the answer for the job, or the right guy for the job. To answer your, kind of original question, in something that he said in their first press conference after they lost to the Packers, he was asked about the history that this team is fighting and everything that they're kind of dealing with. And he said, we offer no apologies for the drought that this team is in. He said, we are responsible for our time here. We will totally take responsibility for that. But I mean, he didn't outright say this, but he's not responsible for the fact that Jason Garrett failed for a decade, or that Tony Romo bobbled a snap in Seattle, or that Patrick Creighton ran the wrong route against the Giants in the divisional round, or that Romo and Witten went to Cabo the week before that game. But, I think that disposition has been necessary because so many people are concerned with the legacy of this franchise and the history of this drought and all the failures that they've become associated with, and that UConn has more playoff wins in their building than they do. I mean, it's just a wild time to kind of be here, and he's the right guy for that job. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that he is going to finish the job, because it's the most difficult thing to do.